Going live, going live. The Hangout on Air is live. Woo!
Yay!
So, you know, when we started, actually, it's funny because I did a lesson on, what was it? I think it was the lesson I did on Facebook in Course 21 at School of Bookkeeping, where I sort of talked about the history of ABO and how ABO started. And it was originally Stephanie Travis and me.
That's right.
Testing the Hangouts, trying to figure out what we could do with it. And then we just kind of said, let's do this every week. And then people started, and then Google was in beta at the time. It was invite only. We started inviting people in. And Gina, you were like one of the first people in. Dennis, so were you. Sarah, you came in, I think, a little while later.
Mm-hmm.
So it's, anyway, Sarah, go on and finish what you started to say before I went live.
Oh, the first time I saw your name or contacted you?
Yeah.
I spend a lot of time on LinkedIn, and
Okay.
you know, I would look at the feed, and it was just Seth.
Mission accomplished.
And, well, what happened was somehow I hooked up Twitter, or I don't know what I did, but all of a sudden you were just like, can anybody else get in? And then so I was trying to figure that out, but something caught my eye, and I went in, and somebody had into your regular website, I guess your nerd website, and you'd been hacked. Do you remember that?
Yeah, I do remember that. And I went on to Google Plus because that's where all the techies were looking for help.
Yeah, because I remember searching and searching, trying to find another email address or some way to find you, and then you got this. Then I got a response that thank you or something, and then I turned off Twitter and forgot about you for a while, I think. But no, it's just so fascinating because, and then I would get on YouTube and go, this guy's got 400 videos. So you became one of my favorites, and my absolute favorite was a desktop video where you took a fresh QuickBooks file, and you had the financial statements on one side and a transaction on the other side, so that as soon as you posted something, it hit the financials. You instantly saw what that transaction did.
Yep.
That was the most fascinating, brilliant thing I'd ever seen, and I've been teaching that way ever since.
Yep, no, that's like my trademark for how I train is, you know.
Great. So anyway, and somehow I found the Hangout.
But it's funny,
Well,
go ahead, Dennis. Dennis?
Thank
Did he
you for
The fun is not getting any better. In fact, it's getting a little bit worse.
Google. You're talking about isn't any better. What's not better?
No, it's not better. It's
Yeah.
actually getting a little worse, I think.
Yeah, I think it was better in the beginning, years ago.
Oh yeah,
Well, they
you
had
mean
all
the
the
whole
tech-
Google Plus platform.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, LinkedIn was where I saw you first, Seth. You sent out the invitation to
Google Plus.
the Google Plus, and that's where I saw you starting to do your YouTube videos. For me, it was the cash flow video, the cash flow on Excel, and I watched you do Excel. I'm like, oh my goodness.
Well, it's funny because that was a very unwitting thing that happened that made a big impact on my life, frankly, because you know, when Google Plus was in beta, it was invite only, and I didn't think it would get any. I mean, I figured some people would be interested, but we was in Michelle Long's group, and I posted just a simple random thing saying, hey, anybody want a Google Plus invite? You know, just send me your email. I'll send you the invites because Stephanie had invited me. Next thing I know, for weeks on end, I was being promoted as the most active contributor in that group because everybody was chiming in with their email addresses. And again, unwittingly, I really created like a funnel of accountants and bookkeepers who I guess were interested A in Google Plus and B apparently in what I had to say for some crazy reason. So you know, and that's how that all really came together. But you know, I love the picture you painted, Sarah, about how I was just everywhere because, you know, that's what I was trying to do.
This guy.
Well, and I was hopefully it was clear that even though you saw my stuff everywhere, it was actually useful stuff. It wasn't me just trying to say, hey, come and buy my junk, you know?
Right. All I could think of was this guy is doing all these videos, I guess to drive traffic to your business, But yeah, I said, he's just giving away all this great stuff. And, well, you know, YouTube, a lot on YouTube is just fabulous content, and you learn so much. And so it's been fun to watch you through the years then create. We had ABBO, the Hangout, and then the private Facebook page. That exploded. And then morphed into the School of Bookkeeping. It's been fascinating to watch you.
Thank you. Well, I have to give credit. The Abro group exploded because of Eric's influence. I mean, when he got involved, we still had, I forget, it wasn't that many members. I mean, nothing compared to what it is now. But when Eric kind of... I'm sorry?
He's a marketing fiend. You're like content, and he's just like, spread it. Yeah.
Well, you know what it is? He included a link to it on every single email that ever went out. And he was sending out a lot of emails for a period of time to a lot of people. I mean, we have a large list that, you know, we've built up over the couple of years. Excuse me. So every time we would send an email out, more people would request to join. And then, you know, what happens like anything else with social media, when you start building that kind of momentum, then it just starts working on its own, you know. And it's funny because another example of that is my Nerd Enterprises YouTube channel. I practically hadn't touched until just the last few weeks, actually. And still every day I get more people subscribing because I've just got so many videos on it that it's just it goes to work for me. I don't have to do anything anymore. But now I'm launching a few other programs that I wanted to sort of distinguish separate from School of Bookkeeping, so that stuff's going back on the Nerd Enterprises channel. I started the Daily Growth Accelerator call. And you know what's funny about that is, and this gets us into the topic for today really, which is how to turn yourself from an expense into an asset, right? So the idea that I had is, and I know I've sort of talked about this often and I've written a lot about it, but you know, it's most of our clients, I think, see us initially. We're an expense. We're a line item on the profit and loss in the expense section, right? Professional services, accounting, and bookkeeping. And that's, I'm sorry.
A necessary evil.
Right. No, that's exactly right. That's how they see us, especially for tax prep purposes. You know, and then
non-income producing expense. Yeah.
Exactly. So, you know what I wanted to start to do, and what's happened already in this first week since I started this Daily Growth Accelerator call, is that I made a commitment. I made my own commitment to show up at 8 a.m. every day. You know, even though nobody had signed up yet, because the concept was born last Saturday, right? And I said, you know what, this could be really cool. It's going to take a while to build because it's a big ask in terms of what I'm asking people to spend, but I'm giving a lot back in exchange for that. So I figure what I'll do is I'll show up at 8 a.m. every day as though I was doing the call, and I'll just record something. So I started doing that, and what I realized that was doing was it was forcing me to stay committed to sort of being better balanced, because now in order to make sure, and I've also made sort of a recent personal commitment to make sure that I walk my dogs every morning, because I hadn't been doing that for the longest time. And I said, you know what, they deserve it, and they need it, and I need it. I probably need it more than they do, because I sit so much at my desk all day, every day. I need the activity. I need to get up on my feet and go for a walk. So in order for this all to come together, it meant that I had to make sure I got to bed early so I could get up by 6 a.m. so I could walk the dogs, shower, get dressed, and do this recording. And then the recording itself has really put my consciousness on the things that it's meant to be about, which is, you know, how to stay productive, what apps am I using, how am I organizing my day, just the real sort of day-to-day in the trenches kind of stuff that we don't often talk about. A lot of the stuff we talk about is sort of higher level, if you will. So I've had better balance this week than I've had in as long as I can remember. Every single day I stopped when it says on my calendar I'm supposed to stop. I have a class that I'm taking. It's sort of personal in nature. It's got nothing to do with business, and that's by design, you know, because I'm trying to force a little better balance into my own life. And then after each of those classes, the other commitment I made is that from the class I'm going straight to the gym, and I'm going to swim laps in the pool. And that's what I've been doing this whole week. And just knowing that I've made the commitment to show up for this and really feeling compelled to have it's making all the difference. So even if nobody signs up, I'll still probably keep doing it just because it's helping me so much. And what that has to do with turning our own firm from an expense into an asset, I think, is in terms of thinking that way, providing resources for people, right? So that's what my videos originally did. They provided a tremendous resource, totally free, for a lot of people. Now, back of that was the fact that, yes, it did drive me a lot of traffic, and it created this 24/7 online lead generation engine, which, again, I didn't know for sure that that was going to happen. I had only hoped, and there are times, I swear to you, when I was going to give up because it didn't seem to be paying off, especially for all the time I was putting in. But now we come full circle forward till today, and my thoughts are, you know, Dennis, you do tax returns, right?
Yes. Yes.
So, do you, and be honest, and you know, this is, it's just meant for constructive purposes. How much time do you spend after a tax return going over it with the client and looking at what you've just had a deep look at to say, hey, how can I add more value to your firm? Now that I've had a deep look under the hood of your business, let's look at this more deeply, and instead of just using the information to file a tax return, let's look at how we can use this information to increase revenue, cut back expenses, and ultimately increase net worth.
Unfortunately, not really, because it's so deadline driven. Like right now, the problem I face is that clients tend to be somewhat less cooperative in getting the information.
Right.
And so it's kind of like everybody trying to get to the door at the same time at the last minute, and someone's going to get, you know, left out. And so I'm kind of under the stress of, I know there's penalties if people don't get their stuff filed on time, but they're making my life difficult by not providing the information. And so it's, this year I've gotten, my practice has expanded because this one CPA basically abandoned her practice and was referring people to me, and so I took on maybe 10, 15 of her clients, which is, I've just been a lot busier this year, and plus I've got a couple audits going on. And you know, ideally I would have time to sit down and try to add value, but the reality is, given the constraints of my personal life with, you know, my family situation, that and my energy, there's only so much free time and, you know, to do.
Is that a filler for a slow season? I think of it as maybe not during tax season, but
well,
let's
right
get
now,
together after tax season. I think you know.
There hasn't really been that much of a slow season for me this year.
But I wonder if it wouldn't be worthwhile to say, you know what, next week I'm just going to block out a couple hours of time for myself, go through the client list that you have, and start identifying which of my clients are the more quote-unquote cooperative ones, right? And then go to because the way I approach my business, and I'm not doing tax returns, but I'm certainly doing other accounting and bookkeeping stuff for clients. My approach when the clients are not cooperative, and by not cooperative, let's just define that as they're not giving us what we need in order to get the job done that they hired us for, right? I have a tendency not to chase those clients so much. I will let them know, I'll request it once, I'll request it a second time, I will do follow-up number 3, and then I'm done, I'm moving on. And if they don't provide me with what I need, it's their problem at that point. It's their fault, because I have done more than my due diligence to get the information. I'd rather focus on the clients who are cooperating, because I have plenty of those, that when I ask for something, they make sure it's that important to them that I get what I ask for immediately, because it's that important to them what they've hired me to do for them. So I wonder if we place more emphasis on those clients, and even went as far as to say, let's part company with the ones that don't cooperate, and say, you know what, you're holding me back from growing my firm because I can't focus on you if you're not going to give me what I need. And instead what we do is we go to the cooperative clients and say, hey, give me an hour or two of your time, let's schedule it, let's review your balance sheet and profit and loss, let's see where we can take the information that I've just compiled, whether it's to do your tax return or to get financial statements out. You know, so many times I know that the bookkeepers and other accountants that I work with, we have it as part of our plan, you know, the service that we've been hired for, we send the reports out, but I often wonder how many of us are actually reviewing those with the client. And I've talked to some people who say flat out, nope, don't do it, don't want to do it. And I think, personally, my opinion, that's a mistake. Because I think you could probably jack up your fees and make more money with fewer clients and, frankly, have more free time to enjoy the fruits of your labor with by actually focusing on the clients who cooperate, adding value by giving them that strategic guidance. I mean, this is all we've been talking about in terms of going out there into the, they're talking about the firm of the future. I'd actually rather focus on the firm of the here and now, right?
Right.
Because I don't know what the future holds, but I know what's right in front of me right now, and what's right in front of me right now, or I have a client list I can go through later today if I wanted to, and start identifying these are the clients that really stand out to me. It's an intuitive thing. It's not scientific. As I go through the list of names in my customer list, the ones that really kind of work with me will stand out, and I can start making that list of clients and scheduling more time with them and saying, let's see how I can add more value to your firm, right? Let's see how I can take the $1,000, let's say, that you spent with me this month, and make sure that I can turn that around for you and turn it into a situation where the $1,000 you spend with me somehow it translates to $2,000 of increased profits for you, right? And how do I do that? If I can help you identify some sales opportunities, or if I can help you figure out how to cut back on costs, or do both and hit it on both sides of the equation. If I can help a client bring in 2 new customers of their own, and the average revenue per customer for that client is $500, well, now they've made their money back and then some, right? They've made back the $1,000 plus the $1,000. So that's the way, and I think just even thinking of it in the terms that I used to title today's topic, right? Just actually thinking in terms of how do I make myself into an asset rather than expense, and that
Right.
Just thinking about that will start guiding your thought process more into trying to find ways to help your clients make back the money they've spent with you. And as we can
Right.
do that more and more, as we can provide that strategic guidance more and more, which is exactly what everybody's saying about the, quote, firm of the future, but again, I want to stress, I think it's the firm of the here and now that we need to be focused on, right? Let's get into the moment. Let's focus on the here and now and say, what can I do right now to help add that kind of value for my clients? Because then I can probably charge more, work on fewer clients, work less hours all week long, and make the same, if not more money, and have more time to enjoy with my family and friends and loved ones.
Well, Seth, that works better for firms like yours and mine, where we're doing a lot more during the year work, accounting work. I mean, if you're getting $1,000 a month, that's an accounting client, not just a tax client. If you've got clients that they have to do their tax return and they put it off to the last second or whatever, that whole model right there is completely different than what we're doing. So,
Right.
they want a cheap return and all that. They're interested in getting a tax return done, and you might find clients that care and would appreciate the more work, but you'd have to make sure that they're willing to pay for it.
So here's how I'd approach that. I would say to the client, first time, I'd say, all right, let's get past the busy part of tax season. Right now we're just about to come out of that, right? And a week from now is the 16th. That's when the personal returns are due, right, Dennis?
No, that's vacation. That's sleep.
Fair enough. But so what I would be doing, though, is as I'm processing returns for my clients, I would put in some kind of a note or message, or when I get on the phone with them, I would say, hey, sometime at the early part of November, do me a favor, let's schedule a 1-hour phone call, right? And because here's the way I look at it from the tax standpoint, and this is actually how I thought of it first, because, Sarah, I agree with you, it's not as clear necessarily how to approach this when you're doing tax returns. Excuse me, but let's say that you have a tax return client, they have an S Corp, and then you're going to do their personal returns, right? So let's say you're charging them $1,000 all in for both returns, right? What I would say is, okay, if I spend the extra hour, and I'm not going to do it with every client because, like Sarah just pointed out, a lot of them aren't cooperative and they're just going to want the return done and they're not going to care, or they're not going to think they care. But I can't tell you how many times I've sat down with a client who started off adamantly telling me they didn't really care, and by the time I was done reviewing their financials with them and showing them how much value there is in there if they just take time to go through it, I've converted them like that. And then I would say to the client, what would it be worth to you? First of all, what would it be worth to you not to have to file an extension next year and not to have that stress, number one. Number two, what would it be worth to you if in order to accomplish that, what we did was a quarterly review? Every quarter you upload your updated books to me. I make sure that we're on track so that by March we can actually file your corporate returns. Or if we're filing an extension at that stage, it's only because we've made a strategic decision to file the extension so that you have time to accumulate money to contribute to your SEP IRA. Right?
Well, what I think that works well for business clients, I've kind of put in a little bit of infrastructure in place, like my business clients. I have them on QBox, so I have, or on QBO or Zero, so I have actual real-time access to their books. As far as personal 1040s, I don't think that would work so much.
No, it
but
wouldn't
in
work on the
terms of-
personal side. That much I'm sure of, unless you're going to do personal financial planning. But on the
Right.
business side, first of all, it's one thing to go through them yourself and have access, but I think it's important to involve the client in the process, because that's how they're really going to be able to see and therefore appreciate the value of what you're doing for them.
Well, one thing I've done is that I've become a live plan advisor, and so after tax season, I'm going to sit down and look at my business clients and then broach the idea of maybe spending some time with them and showing how live plan can help them, manage their business, and that'll tell me a lot if they're not interested,
Right.
Seth, I want to add something too. To be an asset, you have to be available also. I had the experience this week where I was training a client, everything went wonderful, and then all of a sudden something went unexpected with her QuickBooks. She was able to call me, I responded, and just by the fact that I was able to respond to her and talk to her raised my value in her eyes at that moment. So you've got to be ready and you've got to be available, even though you have a schedule, even though that you're doing things in a scheduled way. Sometimes opportunity comes up just on the spot, and you have to be available to be able to pursue it. And
Absolutely.
it makes a huge difference. Makes an absolute huge difference.
And there are so many tools out there that we can use. I mean, the latest one that I know Stacy Kildall and I have been making a big buzz about is Slack. Slack is a perfect way to make yourself available 24/7 to your clients without it having to be disruptive necessarily. Because what I'm going to start doing is creating a Slack team for each client and say, look, when you have a question, if you have something come up, if you need my help, if there's an emergency, all you do is sign in there and post a message and say, hey, Seth, I need your help. And I will get notified, and I will respond to that, and I will carve out the time however I need to get in with you. And you're 100%.
I do that on Smartsheets.
You can, and Smartsheet is another great way to do that. I mean, any of
Create
these.
my to-dos, and I can say when it's done.
Right. So Slack is more of a communications tool.
Right.
And
Smartsheet-
that, I think, is big important, the communications. Just
Absolutely.
getting them to communicate with you.
And being able to have the dialogue, so that in a place like Slack, or I also use Active Collab with some clients where there's a discussions area, and if they have a question, they can log a new discussion, and I'll get notified. The email comes into my inbox, and within 24 hours, I pretty much guarantee that I'll get in there and write them a response. And if it means that I got to log in with them to help them with something, then case in point, yesterday I had a session with a client. It was supposed to be a very quick session. In fact, we started off based on what he told me agreeing. We weren't going to need the whole hour that we had scheduled. And I said, no problem. Any unused time can be reserved for a future call. Well, unfortunately, we opened up a can of worms and discovered that there were some serious problems with his inventory. So next thing I know, an hour became an hour and 15 minutes, and I had to go because I had another appointment with somebody. But the way I was about to leave him, his balance sheet was showing like negative $30,000 in inventory as of yesterday, which needed to be more like $160,000. So I said, look, I'm not going to leave you hanging, but I can't ignore my other appointment. I said, let me get back online with you at the end of today. So Gina, I agree with you 150%. So what I did was I parted company with him. We got back online at the end of the day, and by the time I was done, I got it all fixed. I actually had to go back to 2013 and restate a whole series of inventory adjustments that took place over several interim periods, and then it was right. Then we were able to get it right, because originally the adjustments were posted incorrectly. They were posted directly to the inventory asset account without going through the items. So the balance sheet kind of looked right, but when you run the valuation summary, it's dead wrong. So, that was the essence of the problem, which I had to fix. So I got it done. So and it's interesting because when I parted company with him on the original call, I could tell he was really concerned and really disappointed, that I wasn't able to fix the problem. Because in his eyes, he's in that moment saying, Seth didn't fix the problem for me. But by the time I got done with the call later on the same day, first of all, I wasn't going to leave him hanging. If it meant staying up all night, I would have done it. but I was going to make sure that I got it fixed, and I knew what to do. I just needed the time to get it done, and I tried to reassure him of that, but he doesn't know. You know, for all he knows, I'm blowing smoke. You know, so bottom line is, when I got back on and I ultimately got it fixed, not only was he no longer disappointed, he was ecstatic and happy, because it was the first time that he really was able to look at his balance sheet and his profit and loss and feel comfortable on his own from within himself that his numbers looked right. And we ran the P&L, and I looked at his cost of goods sold, and he says, Seth, does that look right to you? And I said, well, you know your business better than me. Let me do one little tweak. And I added in the percentage of income column, and I said, does this gross profit percentage look right to you based on your experience? And he started thinking out loud and said, well, it varies from product to product, but ultimately he came to the conclusion that, yes, this looks more right than I've ever seen it look. That was the bottom line conclusion.
You know, it's funny. I have a couple of clients that through the years, they'll contact me for all kinds of things that have nothing to do with accounting. You know, I messed up my Outlook. You know, and these are great clients, and and what I hear is, you're the only one that'll help me. I know you're going to help me. I know you're good. You know, it may not be instant. Like I had a call this morning. I said, you know, I'm on this call from 11 to 12. I'll call you as soon as I get off of, you know, YouTube, and they'll wait. And when I started value pricing, I mean, all that support, all that miscellaneous help, and I know one client always needs me on a Thursday, and so I actually plan. He's such a big and nice client that you start planning your days around things like this, but I hear over and over, you know, I'll say, can you delegate that to so and so? But I know if I give it to you, it'll get done. So I've created, and I'm not just, my model isn't just accounting, because a lot of clients think of that as transactional, as data entry, as, you know, I try to be part of the management team, that they think of me when they're hiring. They're thinking of me when they come up with a new revenue stream. You know, don't let me find it on a deposit slip 6 months from now when you've been planning this for 6 months. They include me as part of their team, and I love that. I love that.
So, Sarah, what would you call that? I mean, that's not an accountant. That's not a tech. This is a problem I'm having right now. What would you call that? It's not a bookkeeper. It's not an accountant. It's not IT tech. It's kind of a little bit of everything.
A little bit of IT, yeah.
Yes, yes.
How many times have I said, have you rebooted?
You can put it under a very general heading of just business consulting, right?
Yeah,
But that's still not a correct name. I mean,
I have a client guide, which is my attitude on accounting and business and what kind of client I want to work with. I actually stated it right up front, and my attitude on things and what they can expect from me and what I expect from them. They have to get past the guide first, and then my contract will say, you know, I consider myself more of a controller.
CFO.
And part, well, CFO. See, there's different.
But CFO doesn't
to me
do
is
the
more
IT
strategic.
stuff.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I'm more the middleman between the tax accountant or the auditor or both and the client. I can speak both languages, and there's my value there. But I'm also constantly teaching, because
and there's all many apps that are coming out, right? So
there's so many business people that know their business, but they don't know simple things. It's you know, I had a client that I noticed right off the bat that she would mail. This is back before email, emailing invoices, but she would mail the invoice back with me, back with the check. And finally one day I said, "You're making a copy of that, right?" She goes, "No, I've got my canceled check." I said, that might work in your personal taxes, but in business you have to have that receipt. She had been in business, I don't know, 18 years and never had kept, she always mailed them back with her checks. So it's amazing how if you're big picture, not just focusing on getting the task done, you create this value that has really projected my
And that's what I would refer to
my
as
business. Yeah.
that's what I would refer to as process consulting.
So
Right.
put a name on the whole thing, though. I mean, you have accountants, you have bookkeepers, but you don't have a name for this. I feel like I'm the same as you, Sarah. I'm in between the accountant and the client, and I speak both languages, and that's where my value comes in. But what do you call that?
An advisor.
But that leaves it so open to everything else.
I know.
Well, in the corporate world, they call it a business analyst.
Yeah.
Right. But
Because
business analysts
you know where I'm
are
not
strong.
more strategic. You
But
know,
I'm not strong in strategic. I'm not strong in how to grow your revenue and all those things. That's where I'm not strong. But if I have good numbers and a good process, then the tax accountants or the CPAs and all that, they can step in and do that strategic work without worrying about where the numbers, numbers came from. But the other thing is, and this comes back to how much I've gained from this group, is if it hadn't been for this group, I wouldn't have met Doug Sleater. I bought plenty of Sleater books, and I thought about joining, and I thought, oh, it's a couple $100, and I'll buy the books. But it was meeting and then joining Sleater and then learning about all these products. I would not have a business right now that, I want Bill.com and Expensify and, So all those tools, the clients, not only did they speed me up and help me in our process, but the client gained, Sarah comes up with these cool ideas, of how to make their business more efficient. So it's all boils down to being the advisor. They're not all going to accept it, but if you don't learn all these things outside of just plain old crunching numbers, then that's all you'll be, is a number cruncher.
and some people may want to just be that, but I would be bored out of my mind just doing that all day.
Exactly. So there isn't a right way and a wrong way. Like I don't like to leave the office. If there's a client that absolutely has to see me or meet me somewhere, they're not the client for me.
The last client that was insisting that I go and see them in person, I made them pay $600 for 4 hours, something like that.
If you're just a number cruncher,
Zoom, you use something like Zoom, and I had a management meeting. They're in 3 different states last week, and right before we signed off, one of the new gals went, "This is the coolest thing I've ever done."
Zoom is awesome. We were just talking about that before
Absolutely.
we went live. I was just talking with Gina about that this morning.
I love it.
We may be talking more about Zoom.
And no plane ticket. I said, you'll have a meeting. You'll have a plane ticket and the hotel and the cab and everything. They invited to a inventory process meeting at a client downtown, and they really wanted to come. And finally, I said, "Doesn't anybody there have a laptop?" And one of the gals says, "I do." I said, "Okay." So I joined the meeting from her laptop. Hi, and everybody waved at me, and they had 2 questions for me, and I was done. And I said, "Anything else I can contribute to your meeting?" "No, we're done with it." Off. That would have been.
Yep, and what's really funny is.
And then I would have had to sit through that whole meeting probably because I wouldn't want to get up.
Time.
As you were mentioning Zoom, I had an email Eric forwarded to me talking about Zoom. I mean, Zoom is just, and Zoom's been around for a while, but it's gotten way, way better. I mean, the first time I looked at Zoom was a few years ago, and it was like the concept was sound, but it didn't do what I would need it to. But I was just telling Gina yesterday, I had another session with somebody who was having trouble sharing her screen, and so I used Zoom so that she could share her screen there so that I could take over and figure out what was going on with Adobe Connect on her end. And in the end, we wound up because we just couldn't get her to share through Adobe Connect. She had some AOL thing that was blocking the screen share, so we just did it on Zoom. And I recorded it, and I got an MP4, which I can upload to a server and have her download it. So it's not the way that I normally do it. Normally through Adobe Connect, I give them a link, they can watch it in their browser. But a lot of people have asked me over the years if they can get a local file, and I've said no. So this might be a complete paradigm shift for me in terms of how I do my one-on-one trainings going forward. The only thing is I don't want to have all these MP4 files that I have to manage somewhere. That's why I like Adobe Connect, is because they host all the content. I don't have to worry about storing all these files somewhere in case somebody should lose it and need it again. You know, that's the only problem. But
so Zoom should have a feature to store those for you.
But you said you could upload them to YouTube.
Well, I'm not going to upload a private video though, based on a client's financial statements to YouTube though.
Did you use Evernote for that at one point?
No, I've never used Evernote because again, it's got to be a video file hosted. I've always used Adobe Connect for this, and one of the reasons was because Adobe Connect hosts the video recording on their server, and all I have to do is provide a client with a link and say, here, click on this link, and your video is going to play. Before I used Adobe Connect, I was using WOWbinars, which would render a recording, which I would just, upload via FTP, because in those days you didn't have all these file storage services. And then they had YouSendIt came out. That was like the first one that I could use to send large files.
Mm-hmm.
So I, what do you call it? So I would use YouSendIt. But the problem then was, where am I going to keep all these files? I had these external hard drives that I was putting them on because I can't keep them on my main computer. It's just going to take up too much space. An hour-long video file, when I'm accumulating them many a week, every single week, is going to fill up a 500-gigabyte hard drive, believe it or not, pretty quickly. So now the answer, if anything, what I would do is Box.com.
I was about to say Box.
Gives me unlimited storage. But I ran into a limitation. I didn't realize this, but it's a limit of 5 gigabytes per file. So again, with a video file that's an hour long, I might run into that problem there. I have to see what it looks like when I actually do an hour-long recording with Zoom and see how that comes out.
There was a day last week where a client called and said they couldn't remember how they processed. So I opened up their copy of their data and I talked her through it because I couldn't remember either. And then I thought, doggone it, I wish I had just videotaped what I just did and then somehow get it to her and say, well, if you ever forget again, here's what we did. Do you have a way to just really quickly do something like that?
Do something like what? Say it again.
Okay, I had QuickBooks in front of me, and I just walked through a process of whatever I was doing, how to do a journal entry or something, and then because the client couldn't remember, and I wanted to videotape. It wasn't even that long. It was a couple minutes. Just videotape that and put it somewhere that whenever she forgot how to do it, she could come back and click on.
So if you put it in a service like Box.com, then you can provide it. I'm sorry?
How do you tape it?
Oh, you record it with Camtasia. Just use something like Camtasia to record it and then render the MP4. The beautiful thing about Box.com is that I can create folders, and even though I might have it synced like Dropbox, right? So then that doesn't solve the problem of having those big files on my own computer. But Box.com has an option, folder by folder, where I can say unsync just this one folder. And so it will only keep the files on the web. And now if a client then calls and says, hey, can you send me that video? I can use the mobile app, and I can grab it and send it to them through their email, and they'll be emailed a link which they can use, and they'll have to download the file to watch it, which they can do. But the beauty of it is because they know it's permanently stored, they can download it, watch it, and then delete it. That's the beauty of it. And that's where I'm finding I'm going with a lot of this kind of stuff, is that I'm using that a lot, where I will put I'll download. In fact, my new working folder is my downloads folder, because I have a lot of stuff stored on cloud-based services that I don't keep locally on my computer. So I'll download the files, work on them, do what I have to do, and then if I've made changes, then I'll just re-upload them to wherever, with a V2 or V3 if I need to rename the file to show different versions. But most of the services I use now have their own versioning, so I don't even have to do that. Right, so my downloads folder is my working folder. At the end of every day, everything has to be cleaned out of that and get uploaded. So this way I know my download folder. In fact, one thing I started doing with one client that actually works out to be really cool is we use Active Collab to manage our project. And every day that we have a session, there's another note in a notebook created, which will contain the recording of the session. But then I started saying, hey, you know what? From one session to the next, a lot of times I want to be able to pick up the files that I was working on last time and continue with whatever it is that I was doing where we left off. So what I started doing was downloading all these files, because there'll be like PDFs and Excel files. We're just trying to clean up all his accounting. And so what I'll do is when I'm done, all those files that are now in my downloads folder, I'll zip them up into a zip file and attach them to the note page with that day's working notes and the video link, so that in the next session all I have to do is go back to that note and download it, and I have everything there that exactly where it was the way I left it when I left off. So that's become my process now for these ongoing projects where I'm kind of starting, getting some work done, and then I have to come back to it later. And I love it because I know exactly where to go. I don't have to go hunting and pecking around to find out where did I put those files. It's all right there, exactly what I need. And when the project's complete, then I'll probably take the final versions of those files and actually archive them in a box.com folder. You know, I have a folder for every client in there. So that way...
So
you said that the client would call you and then you would, you know, fire off an email with their link. How do you do that where you don't want them? It needs to be self-service. With a collab, they can go in.
Well, if I do it through box.com, I can simply share the folder with them, but it's still going to be incumbent upon the client to sort of manage that and make sure they know how to access that folder.
Right, right. So it just depends on what the situation is.
Yeah, and I'm sort of learning more and more to really try and work on training the clients to understand how to use the technology that I'm using. And Larry's asking if you can post an MP4 in Slack. Actually, Larry, if I wanted to put it in Slack, what I would do is I would either upload it to Vimeo and protect it there, or I would you can do it in YouTube as an unlisted video so that nobody can find it, but anyone with the link can access it, and you can paste that link into Slack. So if I start doing Slack teams with my clients, which is what I'm now planning on doing, that's probably what I do. Because in Vimeo, you can upload a video, an MP4, and then you can password protect it, for example. So then in Slack, I would paste it, and since Slack is a private space, I'd probably create a channel with, you know, the password that they need for, and it would be the same password for every video.
Oh, there's so many different ways you can.
Yeah, I mean, well, to me, that's the fun part. For a lot of people, it's overwhelming, but for me, that's what makes it fun, because you can get really creative about this stuff.
But see, we've had a problem with my machine is that Chrome keeps getting locked up, reboot. Been driving me crazy. I think I've got it narrowed down to Grammarly as like hogging everything. But you know, when you look at the process, everything I have, because so many clients use different things. Box, iDrive, Google Drive, Dropbox. You know, I've got Smart share file. I mean, everything is just running in the background. I've got the most memory I can possibly have, and you know, this machine's only a year old. You know, it's just. But as we do more and more online work, we've got to have the. If it's anything local, we've got to have the power.
Well, that's why I love Box.com for this kind of stuff, because you're right. As we move forward and we're using all these cloud shared services, it's going to accumulate. And if we're using something like Google Drive or Dropbox, once I decide to sync it so that I have the files locally on my computer, I have to have everything. The only service that I've seen of this kind so far that allows me the option at the folder or even the file level to say don't sync this.
Mm-hmm. Now, did you need a business version of Box.com or anything?
I have a pro account. It's $45 a month, and that gets me 3 users and unlimited storage and bandwidth. But there is a file size limit of 5 gigabytes, which you're not going to ever come close to unless you're doing videos like me. And that's where that's how I found it. I was trying to upload a file that was actually 7 gigabytes. It was a video.
Yeah.
But for most of our accounting stuff, you're never going to hit a limit like that. So now you can be selective. So a client goes inactive, you just unsync their folder so you don't bog your own hard drive down with all that data.
With Camtasia, could you take that file and bust it into 2?
Yeah, I could split that file up. The funny thing about this was what I'm doing now is, and what I was doing in this particular case, is I was what do you call it? I was just archiving old video files, because the other thing I've noticed is that when I start getting fairly close to my hard drive's capacity, everything starts running slower. Videos are processing slower. because it doesn't have the resources. It needs that memory to run processes. So when I have 100 gigabytes available out of just, you have a 500 gigabyte hard drive, but almost 100 of that is used up by system files, right? So you really have like 400 plus, let's say. Bottom line is, I've noticed that when I lift a lot of data off of my hard drive, everything starts running faster. So I started taking, I'm recording videos almost every single day, many days. So I started archiving those in box.com. I used to put them on externals that I have here, which is great, except if those drives crash or if, God forbid, my house burns down and those drives go with it, that data is lost. So I have, for the longest time, wanted a cloud-based solution for storing my video files, and I finally found it because Box has the unlimited total storage option. So I was uploading an old file that was, it's something I'll probably never need, but I like having it just in case something happens and my video files get destroyed on schoolofbookkeeping.com and I want to go repurpose that file so I can get it back up, just anything, so at that point I didn't want to be bothered breaking up that, it's called a TREC file in Camtasia, that recording file that you get when you originally do a screen recording. So instead what I did was that one I put on an external drive, and then in the space on Box where it would have gone, I put a little memo explaining so I remember later, hey, this one file is over on the externals because it's just too big.
Good idea. Well, this has nothing to do with accounting, but I took my iPad one time. We were singing, and I just set my iPad up on a chair, and it was an hour recording. And so I had this massive file, and I don't know, it's so huge I can't really send it to anybody, but if I learn Camtasia or get Camtasia, will that help me? I need to break that up. I just don't know what to do with this massive file. I'd love to be able to have it broken up by song or by, I don't know. Or there are people out there that can take care of stuff like that for me, I'm sure.
Yeah, and the only thing is you have to be able to, put it back together again if and when you need it, right? That's the only challenge to that.
Because I know there's ways to, it's an hour video and you can hop forward to the beginning of the next song, sort of like a CD, like a, I don't know. But when we become such advisors, it's funny when you do advise so much in accounting and then a little bit of here, there, and IT, clients will start calling you for the craziest things, anything computer related, they're going to call. So I'm so weak on a lot of areas that, in the computer, but they expect you to know it.
Well, and that's why we're the most trusted advisor, because we can just do everything.
That's right. So you do have to invest the time to learn as much as possible. I do a lot more studying and learning than I ever did in my career. In the old days, it was you knew how to be an accountant, and you kept up with the tax law, and you kept up on how to use your accounting software. But nothing like it is today.
Today you have to keep up with what new apps are available.
Apps and computers and Apple and Microsoft and Google and yeah.
Yeah, it's we have to learn it to run our own businesses, which then places us in a position to be able to help our clients doing the same stuff for theirs.
Right.
Especially if we want.
There has to be a geeky side to our personalities too.
Well, and the reality is, if you want to build a firm of the here and now, right, which means working remotely, then you're going to need to learn how to do all this stuff. Otherwise, you're not going to be able to even build your own business, let alone someone else's. But I really believe that the role that we have is changing in a way that makes it so that is going to be what's going to be expected of us more and more. The bookkeeping part is getting easier and easier. We just have to massage and babysit the data as it flows through from one place to the next, which means we're going to have an opportunity, is how I like to look at it, to provide more strategic guidance to our clients, to be able to have more time to spend looking at their numbers and saying, hey, here's what you can do to grow your business. Here's an opportunity I see. Let's analyze, for product-based businesses. Let's analyze your products, what you sold this year. Let's look at, let's sort it first based on sales volume. Let's look at the top selling products. Let's look within that and see what the margins look like on each of those products. let's look at a low-selling product with a high margin that maybe we can exploit to sell more volume, because that more volume on a higher margin product is going to translate to a larger chunk on the bottom line, right? So now I can help identify opportunities that the client can then use to say, okay, let's go talk to our marketing team now, and let's see how our marketing team can help us to promote that product more, right? So it's things like that that I can start with analyzing the numbers for the client to help them determine what direction their marketing team should be taking in terms of what they should be pushing and promoting. It's things like that that I think we want to start learning to do more and more to try and exploit these things. And then, and this is a whole other hangout topic, I think, is we have too much focus on just making a bigger profit, right? And I made myself a note. You know, you've heard me say, I think, recently that whenever I get a fleeting thought about an idea for a blog post or a whole campaign, it goes into, now I'm using Trello for that instead of Evernote. But so one of these fleeting thoughts that I just jotted down the other night was based on a headline that's going to go something like, making a profit is not enough. In other words, it doesn't stop there. It can't stop there. It has to go further. We have to look at how do I build my retained earnings, right? How do I build that equity section of the balance sheet? And then what?
Profit.
Right, but I need to. But the point is, I need to retain that profit. If I draw it all out,
instead of wiping it out every year, it's more like, how do we plan and save for the future? Yeah.
And so if I build cash reserves, I don't want to just leave it in the bank. So now we're going to start talking about investing the money, right? Mm-hmm. And that's why I love the statement of cash flows, because it really starts to get my focus on that. When I look at that investing activity section, that's where I'm investing back into my business directly. I'm buying equipment, hopefully, that's going to be used to generate still more profits, right? But at a certain point, if I build up enough cash reserves, then I need to start thinking in terms of other places to invest that money, right? Hopefully we have that problem. Hopefully we have that problem of having too much cash in the bank, so we have to figure out where to put it so that we put it to work for us, right? And I'm starting to do this now for myself. Everything I ever start sort of teaching is based on what I'm experiencing myself. I'm starting to think in terms of, okay, I've needed for a long time to put my money in the market. Where am I going to put it? What I learned a long time ago when I worked as a stockbroker was you invest in things that you know, right? So it's funny, I've been writing so much content lately that I can't remember what I wrote for which sort of channel anymore. I'd have to go search for it. But recently I wrote something. I think it may not be published yet, but recently I wrote something about this very topic of, you know, where to invest the money and investing in what you know. And I made the point, and I don't mind saying this very publicly, that I bought stock in Intuit because I make a big part of my living on their products, right? So I own stock in Intuit. It makes sense. I know this company, and I believe in this company, and I believe they're not going anywhere. If Xero traded on a U.S. market, I'm sure I'd own stock in them too. You can get a pink slip security based on Xero stock here in the U.S., but that's not the same, and I don't trust that as much. If I could actually buy a Xero common stock share in the U.S., I would do it. But what else do we use? We use Microsoft's products, right? Google, don't even bother. It's like $600 a share. You'll buy one share, and you know, that's it. So the trick is, and it's cool to own a stock like that, but the truth is, every time it goes up $1 in price, you're only making $1 because you only own one share. You really want to buy stocks where you can have 100 shares at a minimum. 1,000 shares is ideal, right? So because that way a movement actually translates to real earnings. So anyway, I think these are the kinds of things we need to start thinking about more and more. We have to qualify this and be careful. Don't go giving your clients investment advice, please, unless you have a Series 7 license. But you should be thinking in terms of encouraging your clients to do these kinds of things, especially if you can first work with them to build up those cash reserves.
I want to make a point that I don't want all of our chatter today to overwhelm anybody, especially people who are first starting out, that there's just, you know, where do I start first? A lot of what we do with the advising comes with just experience. For instance, when you have multiple clients, you'll see something that one client's doing that's working. And in the back of your mind, you're thinking, wow, I wish so-and-so was doing that. For example, now this is back when interest rates were, you could actually save and make money. I had a client who was sweeping all the money at the end of the day into a sweep account, making interest, and it was back the next day. And I had another client who had real old school. Dad was, lived through the Depression, and he had $100,000 or so in every bank in town because he was afraid he was going to lose it, sort of like under the mattress now. And so I told him, I said, if he pulled some of this money and then swept it, he'd make $1,500 a month. I said, you would more than pay for my fee. And no, we've always done it this way. And so I just gently brought it up every once in a while. And then somebody else mentioned it to him. I went, wait a minute, my accountant's been bugging me about that. And he called. So we went ahead and made it just as painless for him as possible. First month, $1,500. And he made a lot of money for the next couple of years. Of course, can't do tricks like that anymore with the interest rates. But that was one of those things
where depends on how much money you have. Because you reminded me of
is when
if you can invest at $25,000 or $50,000 at a clip, then you can buy commercial paper and literally overnight make money exactly the way you're describing.
Yeah.
But
it's one of those where experience is what created that advice. And as you work with multiple clients, that's one of the reasons I like being a public accountant, is because it's different every day, and I have a variety of clients versus just working for one company. I would be bored out of my.
See, one of the things I want to start doing more of, and I've begun to do this over the last year or two with the clients that I've worked with, is again, under the heading of providing strategic guidance, this is exactly how you become an asset instead of an expense, right? Is by providing the guidance, the extra insights. I think partly by becoming aware of what's going on in national and global markets even, and how that's going to impact your business. Do you think politics don't impact business? I mean, we've just been talking about legislation that's been passed that says I have to pay overtime even for a salaried employee who's making less than, what is it, $55,000 a year? There's a perfect example.
$50,440.
$50,440 is the exact threshold. Thank you, Sarah.
You're welcome.
So if I don't understand that, I can get into trouble. If I knew about that before the legislation was passed, I might have had an opportunity to state my case for or against, right? These are the kinds of things that I think more and more we can be positioned to help our clients to better understand what's going on in politics, what's going on in the markets, and how they're going to impact our business, right? And I think I might have mentioned this recently. I know I mentioned it in something that I recorded somewhere. It's getting really bad that I can't remember what I said and where, but I've been giving the example lately. This is a real live example of a client I had years ago who was a jewelry designer, and you might remember a few years back the commodities markets were going crazy. Silver was going up and down like nuts. And so, and this client's jewelry is largely comprised of silver. So when the price had dropped at one point, I said, now's probably a good time to stock up on silver. And use that so that you hedge yourself when the prices go back up and you keep your costs down so that your profits are higher. Otherwise, it's going to hit you when you go to pay your manufacturer to put the jewelry. I said, and she said, well, my manufacturer doesn't think like that. He's not going to buy the extra silver. I said, fine, then you buy it and provide it to him and say, use my silver to make my jewelry. Or, worst case scenario, you can buy option contracts to sort of hedge yourself against price fluctuations. And normally that's very risky business, but when your whole world revolves around a commodity like silver, then you know exactly what's going on with silver. I don't think it's nearly as much of a risk. So I advised and guided this client to not just make their jewelry, but to hedge themselves a little bit by understanding what was going on with silver commodities and use that to their benefit, to increase their profits or hedge themselves against rising prices when they're going up. And when the prices are going up, you can buy short options against silver so that when it goes down, you can make money on that. So you're constantly hedging your bets against the very core commodity that is at the core of what you do for your business when you're a jewelry designer making jewelry that's made mostly of silver. It's those kinds of things.
You're thinking like an owner all the time.
Mm-hmm.
You're in accounting, you're in IT, you're in all that, but you put you try to put yourself in the shoes of the owner or management.
Right, but with the
That's, I think,
perspective that I have as the accountant. So it's trying to be the owner with the accounting perspective, so I can combine all that. So, and basically what it the way I can sum it up perfectly is the way somebody I talked to this week about it phrased it. Let me see if I can get the exact phrase up here, because she just put it perfectly. I actually wrote back. I was all excited. So it's basically this. Here's how she summed it up perfectly. And this was from Meredith Wood, actually. I was talking with Meredith about this earlier this week. And I was describing to her what I just described to all of you and what I want to start being able to do more of for people. And she said it's Wall Street level financial advice for Main Street small business. And I just love that. I absolutely love that.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
That's where I believe we can provide amazing value. I mean, what's that going to be worth to a client when I can help them see ways by understanding markets and the accounting together and how they impact one another to take a gross profit from 30% to 45%?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
If I can do that to increase their bottom line and then go one step further and work with them to retain those, to build that equity section of the balance sheet, now years later when the client says, hey, I need an exit strategy, I can say, well, thank God we built that equity section of your balance sheet, because now you have a saleable business. If you have no equity, it's that much harder to get your business sold.
Mm-hmm.
And that's my story, and I'm sticking to it. It's 9:01. Gina, what's going on in your hangout today?
What you see is what you get.
I love that.
A lot of times we continue the conversation from the morning, from your hangout.
You said that recently. That's cool. I'm flattered.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
We'll be talking a little bit about Google Platform versus Zoom and what the advantages are to moving.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, because I seriously think I might want to do that with this hangout, is just move it over to Zoom.
What's the pricing on Zoom?
$149 a year from what I saw.
Yeah, I think I didn't prepay, so I think it's like $9.
And you will need to pay, because what I ran into with my client yesterday, I don't know how long we were going, I think maybe about a half hour, but I got a warning at some point saying that I had 10 minutes left before I'd have to upgrade in order to continue the meeting. So your meeting
or
duration...
you have to pop out and start the meeting again.
Right.
Yeah,
And
they
then
make
have
it
2 separate
irritating.
recordings. Right, no, I would never do that. That's just one of those things that I just...
It's not professional. You want, yeah.
Yeah.
Exactly. So, but it says you can have 50... I've never had a Zoom with more than 8 people, so it wouldn't be 50 little faces all over.
Yeah, and I can't imagine 50 people talking at the same time, because we have a little bit of that now.
A lot of it is, and they can also, like for a large board meeting, a lot of them are just listening. But yeah.
So Sarah, how many people have you had at one time on video on Zoom?
Me?
Yeah.
8. So I haven't been able to really test it.
And how is the quality of the video, though, with 8 people on there?
Awesome.
That's what I was wondering about. That's good to know.
Awesome. Smooth as can be. And we
Because
can
the quality
share
of video on
screens
here
and we
is
flip
not
back
going
and
to
forth, and especially if I'm going over financials with a finance committee, and I can share my screen, and somebody will say, "Oh, well, I have a PDF," and then I share their screen, and it's so easy. And what's nice is I can come up with the meeting number, so I can say we're going to meet every third Thursday at 9:30, and they just know the meeting number.
And you can have multiple meeting numbers on the paid account, right? Or is it just, because from what I saw, it almost looked like you only get one meeting ID number.
One.
Customized.
And that's a little dangerous if you've got 2 groups that'll use it. But once you get the meeting going, you can lock it so nobody else can come in, I guess. But
right.
Yeah, it's you have to look at the different uses, But then a lot of people will just be nowhere near a computer, but they can do it on the phone.
Yeah, the mobile app works great. I've tested that.
Yeah, or the mobile app or whatever. So there's so many different ways they can come in. But yeah, it's something to look at.
So yeah, maybe what we'll do is one week we'll do it as a test and see how it goes.
Okay.
Maybe we'll try that. So next week we're doing the WTF tax deductions hangout because it's the 16th.
Yes.
Ah!
That'll be fun.
I love that you took that title.
I have to
I
do
actually
my
have
return.
3 files created with that because I have a couple things going on and I needed a code name for them, so they're all WTF.
That's great. I love that. So that's what we're doing next Friday. We're doing WTF tax deductions. I'll have to make sure I set the Hangout up now so I can get a lot of buzz going. And everybody needs to accumulate their stories and be ready because we have that. The following week, I'm trying to get Leora Weinstein from PDF to Excel to come on and give us a little demo.
I'd like to do that, yeah.
And then the 30th is going to be scary bookkeeping stories. So that's what's coming up on the Friday morning hangout.
That's awesome.
So y'all have your homework to do. For next week, I
That's
need
right.
those deduction stories, and then I need the scary stories for the last week.
That's easy.
All right.
Have a
Well,
nice
bring
week.
it.
Bye, everyone.
All right,
Bye-bye.
see you all later.